Confidence begins not in what we do, but in who we believe we are. A child's first sense of self is formed long before they can speak. It grows from the environment that tells them whether they are safe, seen, and valued. When that identity is anchored in the awareness that they are created by Allah, known by Him, and loved by Him, they walk through life with quiet assurance. But when identity is built on approval, performance, or comparison, confidence becomes fragile, breaking the moment the world withdraws its applause. In a world that celebrates comparison, it's easy for children to measure themselves against others, their grades, looks, talents, or popularity, yet every comparison whispers a lie. You are not enough. Islam teaches the opposite. Allah says He made each soul unique, breathed His spirit into every human, and honored them above creation. Confidence in a Muslim child must grow from this truth, that they were designed intentionally, not accidentally. Their worth is not negotiable because it is divinely assigned. Parents play the first and most powerful role in shaping that foundation. But a parent who moves with humility and self-respect teaches that confidence is not noise, it's conviction. The way you carry yourself in prayer, in hardship, and in front of others silently teaches your child where real strength comes from. Children must also learn that their weaknesses do not define them. Confidence rooted in faith allows them to embrace growth without shame. When they fall short, they can turn to Allah for help instead of hiding in fear. This understanding transforms mistakes from sources of insecurity into opportunities for learning. And tawbah, they begin to see that imperfection is not proof of failure, but proof of humanity, and that Allah's mercy is bigger than their flaws. As they grow, society will try to pull them into a game of comparison, of looks, wealth, and recognition. A child trained in divine identity will not need to chase worth through competition. They will learn to celebrate others without feeling diminished, because they know what Allah gives each soul is enough. This creates not just confidence, but contentment, the rare kind that frees them from jealousy and self-doubt. Confidence rooted in identity produces a generation that moves differently. They serve without seeking status, speak truth without fearing rejection, and pursue excellence as a form of worship, not validation. They rise from a place of knowing that their value was written by the one who never errs, and no opinion, comparison, or failure can erase what He has already declared within them and then before a child learns to say Allah, they must first feel love. Love is the soil in which faith takes root. It's through gentleness, warmth, and connection that a child's heart opens to receive belief. When a child feels seen, accepted, and cherished, they begin to associate that safety with the source of all love. Faith, then, becomes not a set of rules to fear, but a relationship to cherish. The heart that has tasted love will naturally seek the one who created it. Children do not first learn Islam through lectures or commands. They learn it through tone, through patience, and through the compassion in your eyes when you hug your child after they've failed, when you listen before you correct. You are teaching them that mercy precedes judgment. That experience of mercy becomes their first theology lesson, that Allah is Al-Rahman, the most merciful. The home becomes their first mosque, and love becomes their first prayer. Love does not mean permissiveness, it means presence. It means showing your child that discipline can coexist with affection, that boundaries can exist without rejection. When correction is given with love, it builds strength rather than shame. It teaches that being wrong doesn't make them unworthy, it makes them human. This is how love prepares the heart to trust. And trust is the essence of faith. When faith is introduced without love, it feels like control. When it is rooted in love, it feels like connection. A child who feels emotionally connected to their parents is more likely to stay spiritually connected to their faith. This connection becomes a bridge between their heart and Allah. Through it, they learn that prayer is not a punishment, but a conversation, that modesty is not suppression, but protection, that Allah's laws are not cages, but safeguards of the soul. Every act of love you show your child becomes a reflection of Allah's love for them. When you forgive them, you echo divine forgiveness. When you comfort them, you mirror divine compassion. This mirroring allows them to build a picture of Allah that is not distant or harsh, but near and nurturing. The way you love them teaches them how to love Allah, not through fear of rejection, but through longing for connection. Children who grow up in environments filled with love develop emotional resilience. They learn to process pain without bitterness, to forgive easily, and to give generously. These qualities are the spiritual fruits of a heart anchored in love. They carry this foundation into every relationship with themselves, with others, and with their Creator. Love teaches them not only how to worship, but how to live with ihsan, excellence born from sincerity. Love also creates belonging, a sense that they are part of something sacred and secure. In a world that constantly tells them they are not enough, love whispers the truth. They were created with intention, designed with purpose, and sustained by mercy. This becomes their shield against insecurity and doubt. They no longer seek worth from peers or performance because they already feel whole within the circle of divine love reflected at home. The most powerful dawah begins not from the minbar, but from the heart. A child whose first memories of Islam are drenched in affection, patience, and warmth will grow into an adult who associates Allah with hope, not fear. Love becomes the first translation of faith, a living, breathing language that every child understands long before they can speak it. Children don't become what we tell them to be. They become what they see. The eyes of a child are like mirrors, quietly recording every action, every tone, every reaction. Long before they understand theology, they understand behavior. The home becomes the first classroom, and the parent becomes the first curriculum. Every prayer you pray, every apology you make, every act of kindness you perform, all of it becomes the living textbook from which your child learns what faith looks like in motion. When a parent models sincerity, humility, and gratitude, those traits begin to multiply in the child's heart. You don't need to lecture about patience if you live it. You don't need to demand respect if you give it. Children are wired to imitate the emotional and spiritual atmosphere of their environment. If the home is filled with gratitude, they will learn thankfulness. If it's filled with criticism, they will learn insecurity. What we consistently demonstrate becomes what they unconsciously adopt. Faith cannot be taught in isolation from example. When a child sees you turn to prayer during hardship, they learn that strength comes from surrender, not struggle alone. When they watch you forgive someone who hurt you, they learn that mercy is more powerful than revenge. When they see you choose honesty, even when it costs you, they understand integrity not as a rule, but as a reflection of faith. Your actions become their theology, your daily habits, their understanding of God. Modeling faith doesn't mean perfection. It means authenticity. Children don't need flawless parents. They need real ones. They need to see that you too make mistakes, seek forgiveness, and try again. When they see you humble yourself before Allah after an error, they learn that repentance is not weakness, but courage. When they see your tears in dur'a, they understand that vulnerability before Allah is not something to hide, but something to honor. Authentic faith is contagious because it is lived, not performed. Every value you wish to see in your child must first live comfortably in you. If you want them to be kind, let them see you speak gently, even when you're angry. If you want them to love the Quran, let them hear you recite it with reflection, not obligation. If you want them to be truthful, let them witness your honesty in the small things, the kind of truth that doesn't need an audience. The seeds of these virtues take root through observation, not instruction. Children notice what we prioritize. If they see that your phone gets more attention than your salah, they'll learn what truly matters if they see that you show generosity only when watched. They'll think charity is for approval, not sincerity. But if they see you quietly helping someone, smiling at a stranger, or thanking Allah under your breath, they'll absorb those habits as natural parts of life. They will not remember every word you said, but they will never forget how your faith looked in practice. Modeling also requires emotional modeling, how you handle pressure, disappointment, or success. If your child sees you crumble at every challenge, they learn fear. But if they see you breathe, pray, and persevere, they learn resilience. The way you treat your spouse, your parents, your community, all of it teaches them what love, respect, and service mean in Islam. They will one day mirror that behavior in their own relationships. To raise a confident, faithful child is to live as the person you hope they become. Your presence is their example. Your reactions, their guidance, your priorities, their mirror. Every day becomes a silent sermon. Every choice an invisible lesson. The life you live before them becomes the blueprint they'll one day follow when no one is watching. Discipline is not about control. It's about guidance. It's the art of teaching a child how to navigate their emotions, decisions, and behavior in a way that honors both themselves and others. When discipline is rooted in compassion rather than anger, it builds dignity instead of fear. The goal is not to make children afraid of mistakes, but to help them understand their meaning. Discipline without humiliation tells a child, you are capable of better, instead of you are a disappointment. A child corrected through humiliation learns to hide, not to grow. Their focus shifts from learning responsibility to avoiding rejection. The moment a parent uses shame as a weapon, the relationship becomes a battlefield instead of a bridge. Islam teaches mercy, even in correction. The Prophet never humiliated a person to change them. He guided with gentleness, allowing the heart to remain open. A child who feels safe after being corrected learns that discipline is love in motion, not rejection in disguise. Effective discipline teaches accountability through respect. It invites a child to reflect, not rebel. When a parent explains why something is wrong instead of simply declaring it forbidden, they train the child's conscience, not just their compliance. Over time, this builds inner strength, the kind that chooses right, even when no one is watching. It replaces fear-driven obedience with self-awareness and integrity. The child begins to develop a moral compass guided by understanding, not coercion. Children mirror the emotional tone of correction. If the parent corrects in anger, the child learns fear. If the parent corrects in calm, the child learns self-control. The discipline that builds character is firm but kind, structured but gentle. It teaches that love doesn't disappear when mistakes happen. This consistent emotional safety becomes the foundation of confidence, knowing that failure does not erase belonging. Humiliation, however, fractures that foundation. It tells the child that their worth is conditional, that love can be withdrawn. Over time, it breeds insecurity and resentment, weakening the very trust needed for growth. When a child is mocked, shouted at, or belittled, they stop hearing the lesson and start internalizing the pain. Instead of learning to correct their actions, they begin to believe that something is wrong with who they are. Confidence withers where dignity is denied. To discipline without humiliation requires emotional maturity from the parent. It asks them to pause before reacting, to remember that their role is to shape, not to shame. It means separating the behavior from the identity, addressing the action while protecting the heart. This balance transforms correction into connection. The child learns that consequences exist not to destroy, but to develop, not to punish, but to purify. A child raised in this kind of environment learns resilience. They understand that correction is not a sign of rejection, but of care. They learn to take feedback without collapsing, to admit mistakes without shame, and to grow without fear of judgment. These are the seeds of emotional intelligence, the ability to face one's flaws without losing one's self-worth. Such strength prepares them for a world that often confuses failure with finality. When discipline is done with honor, it becomes one of the most powerful expressions of love. It tells the child, I believe in who you can become. It reminds them that they are accountable, yet always valued. This kind of discipline doesn't just shape behavior, it shapes identity. It raises children who don't seek to be perfect, but who strive to be better, who know that growth and children are born with curiosity before they are given commandments. Their hearts ask why long before they learn what. When we teach them rules without meaning, we raise followers without conviction. But when we teach them why we pray, why we give, why we show kindness, faith becomes personal, not mechanical. Understanding the purpose behind every act of worship turns obligation into love and love into lifelong devotion. A child who knows why will hold on, even when no one is watching. When parents focus only on what to do, children may obey out of fear or habit, but their faith remains shallow. They recite, they perform, but they do not connect. The moment life challenges them, that borrowed faith begins to crumble. Teaching why builds roots deep enough to survive doubt. It transforms ritual into relationship, turning Islam from a list of rules into a living bond with Allah. It teaches the heart before it trains the hands. Every command in Islam carries a reason tied to mercy. When a child understands that prayer is a conversation with the one who never stops listening, they begin to look forward to it. When they learn that hijab is not restriction but honor, they wear it with pride. When they see that charity purifies the heart, they give with joy. Explaining the wisdom behind the practice turns submission into understanding, and understanding into strength. The way a parent answers why determines whether a child learns faith through love or through fear. When questions are dismissed as rebellion, curiosity dies, and resentment takes its place. But when questions are welcomed, the heart stays open. A parent who explains with patience teaches that Islam is not fragile, that it welcomes thought, reflection, and discovery. This openness becomes the soil in which conviction grows strong and steady. Children are more likely to imitate what they understand. If they know why you turn to Allah in gratitude, they will begin to do the same in their own quiet moments. If they know why honesty matters, they will practice truth not to avoid punishment, but because they believe in it. When meaning becomes clear, morality becomes natural. They stop needing external control because internal understanding takes over. Teaching why also requires parents to reflect on their own faith. It invites them to revisit the wisdom behind their own practices and rediscover the beauty in what they may have taken for granted. This shared exploration deepens both parent and child, turning teaching into companionship. The home becomes not just a place of instruction, but of spiritual growth, where everyone learns, questions, and worships together. The Prophet always explained purpose before instruction. He didn't just tell his companions what to do. He showed them the meaning behind it. When a parent follows that prophetic model, they raise children who act not out of pressure, but out of purpose. They begin to view every act of worship as an opportunity for connection rather than an item on a checklist. When children are taught why, they internalize faith as their own. They don't pray because they must. They pray because they can. They don't avoid sin because of fear. They avoid it because of love. Their faith becomes self-sustaining, a source of meaning, comfort, and direction that will guide them long after they leave home. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's the classroom where wisdom is born. Every stumble is a lesson waiting to be understood. Every setback an invitation to grow stronger. When children are allowed to fail without being labeled as failures, they learn resilience. But when failure becomes their identity, they begin to live in fear of mistakes. The difference between growth and shame lies in how we, as parents, respond when they fall. Many parents rush to protect their children from disappointment, believing love means removing struggle. But sheltering them from failure also shields them from strength. A child who never falls never learns to rise. Failure teaches humility, patience, and perspective, lessons that cannot be memorized, only experienced. When parents reframe failure as feedback, they help their children see that imperfection is part of progress, not proof of inadequacy. In the language of faith, failure is never final. Allah does not judge by whether we fall, but by whether we return. When children learn that even prophets faced setbacks yet continued their mission, they understand that stumbling doesn't disqualify them from divine purpose. They begin to see failure not as punishment, but as preparation. It becomes a means of drawing closer to Allah through reflection, repentance, and renewed effort. Parents who shame failure unknowingly teach fear. Children raised in fear of failure stop trying, not because they can't succeed, but because they can't bear the pain of disappointing others. They learn to equate love with performance, but when love remains steady through mistakes, they learn that worth is not earned. It's given. That unconditional acceptance becomes the anchor that allows them to take risks, dream boldly, and grow with courage. Failure also teaches empathy. A child who has fallen learns compassion for others who struggle. They become less judgmental, more patient, and more understanding. They begin to value effort over outcome, sincerity over perfection. This shift forms the heart of spiritual maturity, realizing that what matters most is not never falling, but rising again with grace. Through failure, the heart learns humility. Through humility, it learns faith. When a parent reframes failure, they train their child to look inward rather than outward. Instead of asking, "What will people think of me?" the child learns to ask, "What can I learn from this?" That internal dialogue transforms shame into self-awareness. It teaches them to seek growth rather than approval. They begin to see challenges as opportunities to discover who they are and what they're capable of becoming. Failure becomes destructive only when it's personalized. When a parent says, "You failed," it closes the door. But when they say, "You tried, and now you know more than before," it opens one. Language matters. It shapes the narrative a child carries about themselves. Words that focus on behavior encourage growth. Words that attack identity breed insecurity. The difference lies in whether the parent sees failure as a verdict or as a vehicle for transformation. When failure is treated as a teacher, children grow into adults who are unafraid of trying, unafraid of changing, and unafraid of beginning. They learn to face challenges with confidence, because they know that falling is not the end of the story. It's part of the journey. They understand that even in failure, Allah's mercy is near, and every setback can be the soil from which something greater begins to grow. In a world that measures worth by grades and achievements, it's easy to forget that true success begins in the soul, not the report card. A child who excels academically but is empty spiritually walks through life without direction. Knowledge without faith becomes information without wisdom. Spiritual nourishment shapes not only how a child learns, but also why they learn. It gives meaning to effort and purpose to ambition. When the soul is fed, the mind becomes sharper and success gains depth. Parents often focus on academic excellence as a reflection of love and responsibility, but spiritual grounding is the foundation upon which every other success stands. A child who knows how to pray, reflect, and turn to Allah in difficulty will never be poor in resilience. The one who learns to center their heart before chasing goals builds balance. They don't lose themselves in pursuit of achievement. When faith comes first, education becomes worship, and learning becomes an act of gratitude. Academic success can open doors, but spiritual nourishment teaches which doors are worth walking through. It refines intention, reminding the child that knowledge is a trust, not a trophy. It teaches humility in success and patience in failure. A child connected to Allah studies not to outshine others, but to serve others. They understand that intellect is a gift meant to uplift, not to compete. The spiritual child measures success not by applause, but by impact. When spiritual growth is neglected, even the brightest minds can feel lost. Anxiety, comparison, and pressure become heavy burdens for children striving to prove their worth. Faith acts as a compass in those moments, reminding them that their value was never tied to performance. It tells them that they are loved by Allah, even when they fall short. This inner peace becomes their quiet confidence, allowing them to study, work, and live with balance and clarity. Parents who prioritize spiritual nourishment teach their children to start every task with remembrance. A child who says Bismillah before opening a book learns that Allah is part of their learning process. A child who prays for guidance before an exam learns to trust beyond their own effort. This connection infuses learning with serenity. It transforms studying from an exhausting pursuit into a meaningful journey, because every page turned becomes an act of worship. Spiritual nourishment also nurtures emotional intelligence. A child who learns compassion, gratitude, and patience early on will carry those traits into their studies and relationships. They will know how to collaborate instead of compete, to appreciate instead of envy. They become grounded individuals who understand that knowledge without kindness is incomplete. The best education refines both the mind and the heart. Parents must remember that spiritual lessons are not taught through lectures alone, but through the rhythm of daily life. When a child sees you reciting Quran after Fajr, thanking Allah for blessings, or serving others quietly, they learn that faith is not confined to prayer time. It's a way of living. The home becomes a place where learning is sacred and spirituality natural. This atmosphere teaches that both the pen and the prayer mat lead to success. When spiritual nourishment precedes academic pursuit, children grow into balanced human beings who excel outwardly but remain humble inwardly. They chase excellence not for ego, but for service, not for recognition, but for purpose. Their hearts stay grounded while their minds soar. They become living examples that success without faith is hollow, but faith with success is light, guiding, giving, and growing in every direction. Spiritual nourishment lays the foundation upon which every other form of learning stands. When a child's soul is grounded in faith, they gain clarity about their purpose and motivation behind knowledge. Without spiritual balance, academic success becomes a hollow chase for validation. True education begins when the heart understands why it learns, not just what it learns. Spiritual growth provides that compass. It aligns learning with meaning, reminding the child that wisdom is not merely information, but illumination. A spiritually nourished child approaches learning with humility, not arrogance. They recognize that every bit of knowledge is a gift from Allah and that seeking it is an act of worship. This understanding shifts the intention from competition to contribution. They study not to prove superiority, but to serve creation. When faith fuels intellect, knowledge becomes an offering, and education transforms into a journey of gratitude rather than pressure. Parents who emphasize academic achievement without spiritual depth risk raising children who are successful but lost. A child might master equations and memorize facts, yet feel disconnected from purpose. Spiritual nourishment teaches that the worth of success is not in grades or recognition, but in alignment with divine values. When the heart is centered on Allah, even small accomplishments carry eternal weight, and failure becomes a lesson, not a label. Academic success without spiritual grounding can produce anxiety instead of peace. The child begins to measure their worth by comparison, striving endlessly for approval. Faith reminds them that their value is constant. They are already seen, already loved, already enough. This assurance allows them to pursue excellence without fear. It transforms their learning from a performance into an expression of trust and devotion. When spiritual nourishment leads, it cultivates inner resilience. A child who prays learns patience. A child who reflects learns discernment. These qualities fortify them against the pressures of the world. They can face challenges with calmness because their sense of success is anchored beyond grades or outcomes. Their studies become purposeful steps towards serving a higher calling, and their achievements become reflections of their inner strength. The role of parents and teachers is not only to educate minds, but also to awaken hearts. Teaching Quran, prayer, gratitude, and reflection equips a child with tools that sustain them far beyond academic seasons. These habits train the soul to find peace amid uncertainty and to seek wisdom beyond textbooks. A spiritually nourished child learns that every subject reveals a sign of the Creator, that science, language, and art all point back to divine order. Spiritual nourishment also refines discipline. When a child learns to worship regularly, they learn focus, consistency, and accountability. These spiritual disciplines translate directly into academic habits. Prayer teaches time management. Fasting teaches self-control. Remembrance teaches mindfulness. Thus, faith does not compete with learning. It perfects it, infusing each effort with integrity and intention. When spirituality comes first, education becomes an act of devotion, not pressure. The child begins to see studying as part of their worship, effort as part of their faith, and knowledge as a trust to be used wisely. This mindset produces individuals who excel outwardly, yet remain humble inwardly, who chase success not for ego, but for service, and who understand that a nourished soul will always outlast a decorated resume. Confidence that lasts is not built through control, but through connection. When a child feels seen, heard, and understood, their self-worth becomes rooted in security rather than fear. Control might produce obedience, but connection produces belief. A parent who connects first teaches the child that love is not earned by perfection, but given through presence. True confidence begins when a child knows they are valued for who they are, not just for how well they perform. Connection nurtures the soil of identity where confidence can take deep root. Control creates compliance, but connection builds conviction. A child who acts out of connection is guided by understanding, not pressure. They begin to internalize values because they've experienced love through them, not fear of losing it. When parents rely solely on authority, the child may follow outwardly but feel resentful inwardly. But when love leads, the heart opens. It's in that openness that a child finds the courage to take risks, make mistakes, and still feel safe enough to grow. Connection teaches trust, both in relationships and within oneself. When a child feels trusted, they begin to trust their own voice. They learn to listen to their conscience and make decisions with integrity. Confidence built on trust is quiet but unshakable. It does not boast, nor does it break easily, because it is rooted in the assurance that love will not vanish in failure. This kind of trust allows the child to face the world with calm assurance rather than fragile pride. When parents control too tightly, they may unintentionally communicate, "You can't handle life without me." Over time, this message weakens a child's belief in their own abilities. Connection, however, communicates, "I believe in you, even when you struggle." This simple shift empowers the child to see challenges as opportunities rather than threats. They begin to understand that mistakes are not a measure of failure, but a pathway to growth, and that they are never alone in learning how to rise. Confidence born from connection also teaches emotional awareness. When a child can safely express their fears, doubts, or anger, they learn that emotions are not weaknesses, but signals. Parents who listen instead of lecture create space for self-understanding. This emotional intelligence becomes the foundation of spiritual and social strength. It allows the child to navigate relationships, manage stress, and handle rejection without losing their sense of self. Connection shapes identity by reflecting divine love. When a parent mirrors compassion, patience, and forgiveness, they model the mercy of the Creator. A child raised in such an environment learns that confidence is not arrogance. It is the quiet knowing that they are loved unconditionally. This form of confidence is deeply spiritual. It aligns self-belief with faith in Allah's purpose. It turns dependence on others into dependence on the one who sustains all hearts. A connected parent does not control outcomes, but cultivates growth. They ask, "Who is my child becoming?" rather than, "How well are they performing?" This approach builds confidence that survives beyond external approval. A child covered in dua walks beneath an unseen shelter, guided by light even when the world around them grows dark. When you make dua for your child, you are doing more than asking for their success. You are aligning their life with divine wisdom. Your prayers reach places your words and actions cannot. You might not always be present to protect them, but your dua travels faster than fear and lingers longer than your presence. It becomes a spiritual armor around their journey, a constant reminder that they are never alone, even when distance or time separates you. Dua is also a reflection of your trust in Allah's timing. As parents, it's easy to believe that you must fix everything, but dua teaches surrender. It reminds you that you are not the author of outcomes. You are the vessel of supplication. By turning your hopes over to the one who controls hearts, you teach your child dependence, not on people, but on the divine. This surrender is not weakness. It is the ultimate act of faith. It acknowledges that your love is powerful, but Allah's love is perfect. Your dua shapes not only their destiny, but also your perspective. Every sincere prayer transforms your heart to see your child through mercy rather than anxiety. It shifts your focus from fear of failure to faith in divine process. When you pray consistently, you are teaching your child that their worth is rooted not in worldly achievements, but in spiritual connection. They learn that success without dua is hollow, and dua without effort is incomplete. Every prophet's story begins and ends with dua. Prophet Ibrahim's dua shaped generations. Prophet Zachariah's dua brought forth a miracle. And the Prophet Muhammad taught that dua is the essence of worship. When you make dua for your children, you are joining a sacred legacy. You are not simply asking for protection or provision. You are invoking divine purpose upon their lives. That prayer becomes part of their spiritual inheritance, echoing through generations as unseen guidance and mercy. Sometimes your dua may seem unanswered, but even in silence, Allah is responding. He may delay because He is preparing something greater, or protect your child from what you cannot see. Faith is knowing that unanswered dua is not ignored dua. Every prayer carries weight in the unseen, and every tear shed in prayer waters the roots of your child's destiny. What you sow in prayer today may bloom in their future when they need it most. A parent's dua also carries the power to reshape lineage. When you pray for your child's heart, character, and faith, you are not just influencing one life, you are influencing the generations that will come after them. Righteous children often rise from the prayers of parents who wept in sujood. That unseen intercession becomes a legacy stronger than wealth or status. Your dua today may be the reason your descendants walk in light tomorrow. Make dua not just for their worldly achievements, but for their eternal success. For hearts that love Allah, for minds that seek truth, for lives that serve with humility. Every dua becomes a map, guiding them toward their purpose, even when you can no longer guide them yourself. When your hands rise in prayer, you are not merely asking. You are building, shaping, protecting, and partnering with the divine to craft the destiny of a soul entrusted to your care. Raise children whose hearts tremble at the thought of losing Allah's presence, not merely your praise. When a child learns to fear disappointing you more than disobeying Allah, their compass becomes dependent on human approval rather than divine truth. But when they understand that the ultimate relationship in their life is with their Creator, they develop an inner morality that stands firm. Even when no one is watching, fear of Allah is not terror. It's reverence, love, and awareness that His gaze matters more than any audience, that consciousness builds integrity that lasts beyond your supervision. Approval-based parenting often creates children who perform, not believe. They learn to behave for applause, to hide mistakes, and to seek validation rather than transformation. The moment your approval is absent, their sense of direction crumbles. But when faith is the anchor, they act rightly because they know Allah sees them in silence, in solitude, and in the spaces where human eyes never reach. A child raised with that awareness becomes consistent, grounded, and sincere. Their goodness is no longer dependent on being seen. It's sustained by being known by Allah. When parents replace divine accountability with emotional control, they unintentionally train children to fear rejection instead of reflection. A child who fears losing love becomes anxious. A child who fears losing Allah becomes humble. The first strives to please people. The second strives to please the Creator. The difference is profound. One lives under pressure, the other under purpose. When children know that your love is unconditional, but Allah's guidance is essential, they begin to develop both confidence and conscience. Teaching the fear of losing Allah begins with your own example. When you prioritize prayer over convenience, honesty over comfort, and gratitude over complaint, your child learns reverence without words. They see that Allah is not a distant idea, but a living presence that guides every choice. This awareness doesn't make them fearful in a crippling way. It makes them aware in a liberating way. They begin to understand that faith is not a list of restrictions, but a compass toward peace. Love and fear and faith are not opposites, they are partners. You teach your child to love Allah's mercy and to respect His boundaries. This balance creates spiritual maturity. A child who only loves without awe may become careless, while one who only fears without love may become hopeless. But when love and reverence intertwine, the heart becomes both tender and strong. They obey not out of compulsion, but out of devotion, knowing that every act of obedience is a form of love. When your approval becomes secondary to Allah's, you empower your child to seek truth even when it challenges comfort. They learn to say no to wrong, even if it costs them acceptance. Because their loyalty lies higher than popularity, this divine awareness becomes their internal compass in a world full of noise. They will no longer chase validation from peers or authority figures because their sense of worth flows from a higher relationship, one that is eternal, stable, and sustaining. The goal of parenting in faith is not to create children who behave perfectly in front of you, but who remain sincere in front of Allah. This requires patience, prayer, and trust. You cannot control every decision your child will make, but you can anchor their conscience to something stronger than your approval. When they fall, they will turn to Allah in repentance, not hide in shame. When they succeed, they will express gratitude, not arrogance. Their moral compass will remain steady because it's aligned with divine truth, not shifting human expectations. A child who fears losing Allah carries within them a shield against temptation and confusion. They know that every action echoes beyond this world. Such children grow into adults of integrity, those who lead with humility, work with purpose, and live with peace. When your parenting inspires divine consciousness rather than dependence on approval, you have given them the greatest gift, not perfection, but a heart that never forgets its source. When a parent constantly compares their child to another, even with good intentions, it trains the heart to seek validation instead of purpose. But when a parent reminds their child, you are valuable because Allah made you, it plants seeds of unshakable self-worth. This is not about inflating the ego, but about aligning identity with divine reality. A child who knows they are a servant of Allah doesn't need the world's applause to feel significant. True confidence is not arrogance, it's peace. It's the quiet strength that allows a child to stand firm in their values when others bend. It's the assurance that they don't need to compromise faith to be accepted. When their sense of self is connected to the one who never changes, they remain steady even when the world shifts around them. That kind of confidence cannot be manufactured through praise. It's nurtured through faith. To raise a confident Muslim child, parents must model this identity themselves. A parent who constantly seeks people's approval teaches their child that validation is survival. The child learns to take ownership of their choices, to think critically, and to walk in self-respect. Connection gives them the courage to say no to what's wrong and yes to what's right, not because they fear punishment, but because they understand purpose. Confidence that grows from connection is generational. A child who has been loved, listened to, and believed in will carry that same nurturing energy into their own relationships. They will lead with empathy, not ego, and their strength will be steady because it's not borrowed from control, but grown through understanding. Such confidence shines quietly, not demanding attention, but reflecting peace that can only come from being deeply connected to love, truth, and divine guidance. Your dua is not just a wish, it is an act of creation through faith. When you raise your hands and call upon Allah for your child, you are shaping the unseen architecture of their destiny. You may not see immediate results, but every whispered prayer plants a seed in the soil of the divine plan. Dua is the bridge between your effort and Allah's mercy, between what you can control and what only He can transform.